Today we're talking about what, in my opinion, is a masterpiece of aesthetics and obsession, Killing Eve. This series, produced by Sid Gentle Films for BBC America and first released in 2018, instantly became a cult phenomenon, not just because of its razor-sharp writing, but because of a visual identity that so many creators still dream of recreating. Distributed globally on platforms like Netflix, the show unfolds across 4 seasons that feel like a sensory journey through Europe's most iconic capitals. At the center of it all are 2 extraordinary women, a brilliant Sandra Oh as Eve Polastri and a magnetic Jodie Comer as Villanelle. But the cast doesn't stop there. Orbiting around them are powerhouses like Fiona Shaw as the icy Carolyn Martins, head of MI6's Russia desk, and Kim Bodnia as Constantine, Villanelle's mentor and handler. It's an ecosystem of layered, unpredictable characters where, like in the best cinematic thrillers, nobody is ever truly who they say they are. And thankfully, we get 4 seasons to peel those layers back. On paper, Killing Eve starts like a classic spy thriller, but it flips that premise almost immediately. Eve is an MI5 security officer, stuck in a stable but emotionally flat marriage and bored by the monotony of office life. She becomes increasingly obsessed with an international assassin responsible for a string of political murders across Europe. That assassin is Villanelle, a stylish psychopath with impeccable taste and a complete absence of empathy, working for a shadowy organization called the 12. What begins as a cat-and-mouse chase quickly becomes something far more intimate and far more dangerous, something neither Eve nor Villanelle truly wants to let go of. Eve feels a kind of thirst for Villanelle, and honestly, you could compare Villanelle to a fountain of blood Eve keeps drinking from, all the way to emotional exhaustion. If we look at Eve, she's basically the embodiment of chaos hiding beneath normalcy. She's messy, sleep-deprived, constantly eating badly, living in cramped and cluttered London spaces, but she also has an extraordinary investigative mind. Her fascination with crime isn't just professional curiosity, it's hunger. A hunger for life, for danger, for something beyond the suffocating mediocrity of her daily routine. What's fascinating is that her evolution is reflected visually too. The closer she gets to danger, the more stripped down and raw her image becomes, almost as if she's losing parts of herself, or maybe awakening a side she never allowed herself to access before. And then there's Villanelle, who is Eve's complete visual opposite. Villanelle is the triumph of aesthetic excess. She lives in luxurious apartments in places like Paris, wears high fashion like second skin, and turns every murder into performance art. She doesn't kill just for money. She kills for attention, for stimulation, to fill an emotional void that only risk seems able to satisfy. For Villanelle, beauty is both a mask and a weapon. She moves through a world of saturated colors and perfectly composed frames, where every shot feels like a contemporary fashion editorial. This is one of the real beating heart of this series, and what you should study if you want to understand how visual storytelling really works, is the relationship between Eve and Villanelle. It's not love. It's not hate. It's something much more dangerous, a fatal attraction born out of recognition. When Eve and Villanelle finally meet, they each see in the other the missing part of themselves. A relationship begins that's built on curiosity, provocation, and obsession. Villanelle starts leaving clues for Eve, almost like she's courting her through blood. And Eve, in turn, risks her career, her marriage, and her life just to get closer to Villanelle's mind. Their dynamic stays suspended in this constant tension. Expensive gifts, home invasions, violence that somehow becomes intimacy. The reason they're so bound to each other lies in a deep psychological codependency. Villanelle needs Eve because Eve is the only person who truly sees her, not just as a weapon, but as something more layered and human. That feeds Villanelle's narcissism, yes, but also her longing to matter. Eve needs Villanelle because Villanelle represents absolute freedom. Freedom from rules, morality, and all the expectations that have kept Eve emotionally numb for years. They're two sides of the same coin. Eve is civilization tempted by chaos. Villanelle is chaos longing for connection. And that obsession pulls them into a vortex where the line between hunter and prey completely disappears. That's why Killing Eve is such a perfect example of how direction, lighting, and visual tension can communicate obsession far better than dialogue ever could. Now, talking about Killing Eve without bringing up the costume design would honestly be a crime. Because if this show feels so expensive and iconic, it's also because the clothes are never just clothes. They're narrative tools. What's really interesting is that, unlike many shows, Killing Eve changed costume designers almost every season, while somehow maintaining incredible consistency in how clothing reflects psychology. Season 1, the season that set the tone, was designed by Phoebe Gaye. She's the one who created that iconic visual contrast I've been talking about. For Villanelle, Gaye pulled heavily from luxury fashion, brands like Dries Van Noten, Burberry, and Lanvin. In interviews with publications like Vogue and Harper's Bazaar, she explained that Villanelle uses clothing the way a child uses costumes, to play at being someone else, but with ruthless adult taste. The cultural turning point, of course, was that iconic pink tulle dress by Molly Goddard. Phoebe Gaye chose that dress specifically to subvert the assassin archetype. A professional killer showing up to a psychiatric appointment dressed like a cloud of pink cotton candy is visual rebellion at its finest. Villanelle is basically telling the world, I'm so untouchable, I can afford to be this visible. In later seasons, the baton passed to Charlotte Mitchell and then Sam Perry. Mitchell, in particular, deepened the idea of clothing as weaponry. While Villanelle keeps parading through luxury brands, the work on Eve's wardrobe is just as meticulous, just less obvious. Official production notes emphasize how Eve's wardrobe was deliberately tactile and understated. Linen, wrinkled cotton, neutral tones, loose cuts. The goal was to make the audience almost feel Eve's physical discomfort. She's a woman too mentally consumed to care about how she looks. And yet, as her obsession with Villanelle grows, Eve's clothes slowly become darker, sharper, almost like visual proof of her shift toward the dark side. According to outlets like The Hollywood Reporter, the costume budget on Killing Eve was significant, but the real genius was in the mix. Vintage pieces from flea markets blended with archive pieces from major fashion houses. Villanelle isn't terrifying because she has a gun. She's terrifying because she's holding a gun while wearing couture. Style is her real weapon. And to make this even clearer, think about someone like James Bond. Bond represents traditional spy aesthetics. His style is what Italians call sprezzatura, effortless elegance, but within a strict code. Bond's suits, whether by Tom Ford or bespoke tailoring from Savile Row, are designed to help him disappear into elite spaces. Casinos, diplomatic events, halls of power. His elegance is armor. Fixed, rigid, institutional. Bond is order. Villanelle destroys that entire idea. She doesn't want to blend in. She wants to be seen, admired, feared. Which, honestly, is kind of absurd for someone in her profession. And that's exactly the point. For Villanelle, clothes are pure pleasure, pure performance. She wears an evening gown to eat pasta in the kitchen, a pastel suit to commit murder. If Bond is order, Villanelle is chaos. Her style is fluid. She changes skin every episode. She uses fashion like performance art. Bond's suit says, I'm here to complete a mission. Villanelle's outfit says, I'm here to have fun, and you're all my toys. Killing Eve is ultimately a hypnotic journey through desire and obsession. It showed me that the true engine of a great series isn't just plot, it's the centrifugal force of its characters. Villanelle's almost frightening elegance isn't just style for style's sake. It's the reflection of a soul desperately trying to feel alive. And Eve, in chasing a monster, ends up confronting, and maybe rediscovering, herself. That constant tension, that mutual mirroring, is what makes this series such a psychological masterpiece. If James Bond taught us what mission looks like, Villanelle showed us what the seduction of danger feels like. This isn't a story about good versus evil. It's the story of two lonely women who recognize something in each other, and in doing so, destroy everything around them. Killing Eve stays with you because of its silences, because of its charged glances, because it makes you empathize with darkness right when you thought you were immune to it. The show ends, but the sense of wonder and emotional disorientation it leaves behind is exactly what we all hope to find every time we press play on a new story. It's a reminder not to settle for what we've already seen, to always look for that detail, that color, that emotional shade that makes a character unforgettable. So if you were just as trapped in the game between Eve and Villanelle, or if this review made you want to experience the series for the first time, let me know in the comments. Which one of their encounters left you breathless? Let's talk about it below. And if you want to keep exploring what really makes the stories we love so unforgettable, subscribe. I'm Andrea, and this is Andy on Set. Thanks for staying with me all the way through, and as always, I'll see you on the next set.